Hey everyone, and welcome back to Autoverse. Today, we're diving into a topic that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie, but is becoming more real every single day: the ethics of self-driving car accidents. So, imagine this. You're cruising down the highway in your shiny new autonomous car, hands-free, just enjoying the ride. Suddenly, a group of pedestrians jaywalks right into your path. The car's computer calculates that it can't stop in time. It has two choices: hit the pedestrians, or swerve into a concrete barrier, which would almost certainly harm you, the passenger. What should the car do? Who gets to make that decision? This isn't just a hypothetical brain teaser. It's a real ethical dilemma that engineers and lawmakers are grappling with right now. This is the modern-day trolley problem, and it's at the very core of autonomous vehicle development. The classic trolley problem goes like this. A runaway trolley is about to hit 5 people tied to the main track. You can pull a lever to divert the trolley onto a side track, but there's one person tied up there. Do you pull the lever, actively choosing to sacrifice one person to save 5? Most people say yes, they'd pull the lever. It's a utilitarian choice, the greatest good for the greatest number. Now, let's put this back in the context of our self-driving car. If the car swerves to avoid 5 pedestrians and hits one instead, it seems like a similar calculation. Program the car to minimize harm, right? It sounds simple enough. But what if the choice is between hitting one elderly person or one young child? What if it's between hitting a doctor on their way to perform surgery and a convicted criminal? Should the car be able to make value judgments about people's lives? That's where things get incredibly complicated and, honestly, pretty uncomfortable. Researchers at MIT even created a platform called the Moral Machine to gather human perspectives on these scenarios from millions of people worldwide. The results were fascinating and showed a lot of cultural variation. For example, some cultures prioritized saving the young over the old, while others prioritized saving pedestrians over passengers. There was no single, universally accepted answer. This brings us to the first major ethical framework: utilitarianism. As we touched on, this approach focuses on outcomes. A utilitarian self-driving car would be programmed to always choose the action that results in the least amount of total harm. If it's a choice between 1 death and 5 deaths, the car chooses the path that leads to 1 death. It's a numbers game. The problem is, pure utilitarianism can lead to some unsettling conclusions. What if saving a group of people requires the car to sacrifice its own passenger? A survey found that while most people agree that cars should be programmed to be utilitarian and save the most lives, they themselves would not want to buy a car that might decide to sacrifice them for the greater good. It's a classic case of, it's a great idea, as long as it doesn't apply to me. This creates a huge hurdle for car manufacturers. If they build the most ethical car, nobody might buy it. This leads us to our second framework: deontology. This philosophy argues that certain actions are inherently right or wrong, regardless of their consequences. A deontological approach might say that a car should never be programmed to intentionally harm anyone. Its primary directive would be to follow the rules of the road and protect its occupant at all costs. In this scenario where it must choose between hitting pedestrians or swerving into a wall, a deontological car might be programmed to stay its course, because swerving would be an intentional act of causing harm to its passenger. This do-no-harm principle is appealing because it avoids having a machine make a calculated decision to kill someone. However, it could also lead to more overall casualties. If the car's default is to protect the occupant above all else, it might end up hitting that group of 5 pedestrians, even if swerving and sacrificing the occupant was an option. This doesn't sit right with many people either. Then there's a third perspective, often called virtue ethics. This framework doesn't focus on rules or consequences, but on the character of the moral agent. Of course, a car doesn't have character, but we could think of it as programming the car to act as a virtuous driver would. What would a responsible, skilled, and moral human driver do in that split-second situation? The trouble here is that even the best human drivers react based on instinct, emotion, and incomplete information. We don't run complex ethical calculations in a microsecond. We just react. How do you program instinct? And whose version of a virtuous driver do you use as the model? A professional race car driver might have different instincts than a cautious grandmother, so we have these competing philosophies, and none of them give us a perfect answer. This isn't just an academic debate. The decisions made now will be coded into the software of millions of vehicles. And that brings up the big question of responsibility. When an accident inevitably happens, who is to blame? Is it the owner of the car, who chose to use it? Is it the manufacturer, who designed the vehicle and its systems? Or is it the programmer who wrote the specific lines of code that made the final decision? Currently, in most legal systems, the driver is responsible. But if there is no driver, the entire concept of liability has to be rewritten. Some have proposed that manufacturers should bear the responsibility, arguing that they are the ones putting these machines on the road. This would incentivize them to make the safest possible cars. Others suggest a no-fault insurance system, where a dedicated fund covers damages from autonomous vehicle accidents, sidestepping the blame game altogether. Germany was one of the first countries to establish ethical guidelines for autonomous vehicles. Their rules state that the system should always be programmed to avoid injury or death, and that in unavoidable accident situations, any distinction based on personal features like age, gender, or physical condition is strictly impermissible. The car cannot choose to hit an old person to save a child. It must treat all human lives as equal. Property damage should always be accepted if it can prevent personal injury. This is a clear move towards a deontological framework, forbidding the car from making value judgments. This seems like a sensible starting point, but it still doesn't solve every scenario. What happens when the choice is between harming one person and harming another, with no option to just hit a tree? The German guidelines don't fully resolve this, which shows just how difficult this is. Ultimately, there might not be a single right answer that satisfies everyone. The solution will likely be a complex mix of technology, regulation, and public consensus. Cars will be programmed with a hierarchy of rules. First and foremost, obey all traffic laws. Second, in an unavoidable crash, minimize harm. And third, within that minimization, do not discriminate between people. But the final decision of what minimize harm truly means is a conversation we all need to be a part of. Should the car prioritize the lives of pedestrians over its passengers because they are more vulnerable? Or should it prioritize its owner, who paid for the car and its protection? This is one of the most significant ethical challenges of our time. It forces us to confront our deepest values and decide what principles we want to embed into the machines that will soon share our roads and our lives. The cars themselves are just following instructions. We are the ones who have to write them. What do you think? If you were designing a self-driving car, what ethical rules would you program into it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear your take on this. Thanks for joining us on Autoverse for this deep dive. If you found this topic as fascinating as I do, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more content on the future of transportation. We'll see you in the next one.